Moving on to Daniel Nielsen, you have a bit of an injury there, so thank you so much for coming. I hope that was nothing to do with the conference.
Oh, well, I was on one of the buses the other day.
Yeah, so can you tell me a little bit about, we're interested to know what the papers are saying about the conference so far, and you're obviously writing for the Copenhagen Post. That's obviously usually a weekly paper, and you're now releasing that daily, so how's that been? I mean, is that sort of, are you massively overloaded with stories and struggling, or is it going okay?
The Copenhagen Post is a weekly newspaper. It's an English language newspaper based here in Copenhagen, but we're producing a daily newspaper called the COP15 Post. It's all about the conference, all about climate change, and we have pretty limited resources, so we've got a lot of volunteers in, 10 students from Aarhus who are studying over there on an international journalism program. So yeah, there are a lot of bylines in the COP15 Post, but not that many of them are working at the Copenhagen Post.
No, it sounds good. I mean, we've had a look at some of the papers today, and this is actually one of your stories out of the Copenhagen Post, just saying that, in fact, a lot of the Danish now are in favour of nuclear power. I mean, that's quite an interesting statement, obviously, especially at the climate talks. What do you think, why do you think this has come about?
Well, first of all, you have to be a little bit sceptical about the way in which the people were polled for that story. It's the newspapers in Denmark, there's a bit of a trend to hire polling companies and do the polls that to specific questions that they want. They want the specific answer, and of course, a story that says Danes are in favour of nuclear power is a much better story than a story that says that they're not in favour.
Yeah, because we've heard that all before, haven't we? Yeah.
But there is a trend in not just in Denmark. I've seen it in New Zealand as well, and in other media around Europe, that nuclear power is more acceptable now, especially in context of climate change. It's seen as a more climate-friendly source of energy than coal and burning fossil fuels. Of course it is. And it's seen as a bit of a stepping stone towards a greener future with more renewable energy. But there's the problem of nuclear waste. What do you do with it? Where do you put it? You can dig a big hole in the earth like they do in Australia, or you can shoot it off into space in some kind of futuristic world.
It's not as clean cut as saying this is nuclear power, this is going to work, is it? So no, you're absolutely right. We'll move on now to Financial Times. There's a story here. The US Environment Protection Agency actually announced today that they have acknowledged that greenhouse gases can harm people's health. So that's obviously a bold statement, and a lot of big businesses now are starting to worry that the US are going to do something and they're going to have to change their ways. Mm-hmm. I mean, what do you think? Well,
again, that's not a very surprising angle. That in the US, it's always about how will it affect business. That's just the American way, isn't it? And there's been a lot of talk at the conference as well about how to get the US involved and to convince the US and probably Canada as well. The deal has to be based on market-based solutions rather than regulation. Of course, the reality is that you need both, but yeah, the US will always be pushing towards market-based solutions. I don't know, probably our North American friend here might have more insight into that.
Slightly. I know that Canada is looking to that as well, mostly because that's what the United States is doing.
They're following closer behind, aren't they?
Yes, and that's been their excuse for stalling for quite some time, is we need to wait for the United States to do something. And now that the United States seems to be taking action, it's very hard for them to find an excuse to stall, but they still seem to be doing it, even domestically, taking action domestically on climate change. There's solutions there. There's been significant detailed economic modeling done on reaching certain greenhouse gas reduction targets. Even the government's own target, which amounts to about 3% below 1990 levels by 2020. It's not very good. You know, it's terrible. It's not even our Kyoto target. No. And they've received harsh criticism because they don't have any plans or policies in place to meet even that target. So we've kind of been playing this card that we're going to follow the leader being the US. And now that the US has started moving, we aren't following very well. We're not even good at following. It's actually a pretty sad situation.
We've actually had an announcement just this afternoon from the EU president saying that he doesn't believe at all that a legally binding agreement is going to be made, and it's just going to be, talks at this stage. What do you think about that, Niels? Do you think, I mean, maybe we all knew that there wouldn't be a binding agreement signed, but should he be saying that at this stage? Was there still hope to be had for that? Or?
Well, I would rather comment on what was said here, and I think when I listen to you, Daniel, that there's a tendency of making global warming a almost religious issue. And that is what we try not to do, at least in our in our logistics solution to the conference, we try to show that there are so many ways that we can actually take action here and now. We can bring down CO2 emissions, the way we organize ourselves, what we put into our cars, and that actually, and that's what we are proud to say in Denmark, there's a lot of money to be earned in it. The wind turbine industry in Denmark is now one of the, I think it's the biggest exportation item, and it used to be nothing in the beginning of the 70s, and now it's really a big industry in Denmark. So, and it's not only because of free market forces, it's also due to regulation, but we still have a case here, and we try to show that's what we can do with the logistic solution to the conference, that there are many concrete ways of taking action and earning money and solving problems at the same time.
Yes, that's an excellent point. That's something that we don't see in Canada, is that direction you really need from the government to force, not to force, but to encourage these changes.
It just
that
needs to be
you see.
accessible, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly. And the Canadian government doesn't make those steps that are fairly simple. Instead, they seem to invest in these kind of science fiction solutions like carbon capture and storage, which really haven't amounted to much yet, even though they've spent billions of dollars on it.
Yeah. On a completely much lighter note, talking of, you know, people taking this seriously and making changes, we've got a story in here, The Independent, which says that the delegates were quite upset that they didn't receive a delegate bag, and they actually wanted a little figurine of the mermaid. So it's actually in the Copenhagen Diary section. I mean, is this newsworthy? Why didn't they get any delegate bags?
Well, it is interesting, especially for the media, that there isn't a goodie bag. I think most conferences you go to, you'll get a little bag with some cool stuff, such as a little mermaid figurine,
yeah,
which
exactly.
everybody can use. But I mean, as a journalist, I think my role is to do a public service. It's not to get goodie bags at conferences.
No,
and
yeah.
I'm really happy that I've got free transport in Copenhagen. And there's also free chocolate at the cafes as well.
And you usually find that people throw these bags away anyway, don't you? They chuck out the paper inside.
Well, I wouldn't, but you know.
Yeah. I mean, do you have a comment on that?
Well, I think it's actually parts of the Prime Minister's speech that have been not very well digested by is it The Guardian? I'm sorry.
It's The Independent, yeah.
In The Independent, because it's a rephrasing of what he said, that he was sorry if people felt that they really would like to have a small figurine of the Little Mermaid. But what the money actually was used for, and that I think I'm also proud of that solution, that we, instead of spending 4 million kroners on goodie bags that are likely to be left in trash bins in hotels and in the conference center, we spent the money on financing 11 scholarships for students from around the world.
Yeah.
And they are now in Denmark. They actually attended the opening ceremony this Monday, and they were very happy to be there. And they are now pursuing studies, master's degree studies at Danish universities in climate studies.
So in fact, we should have put that information on everyone's free travel pass, and then everyone should have been happy.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. So, I mean, Daniel, on the subject of the EU President's announcement, is that going to be all over the papers tomorrow, do you think? With sort of people's opinions?
But there's just such a glut of information on this conference that it's hard to really say what the big stories are. There's just so many. There's a new big story every 2 hours, you know. It's really difficult to keep up. I think there's maybe 40 press conferences a day at the Bella Centre, plus all the side events around the city. There's the Copenhagen Live in the city centre. There's the Klimaforum 09, where Naomi Klein spoke at the opening. Yeah, it's just incredible how much stuff's happening.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. I just want to say thank you to all of our guests, Niels Gellert from the Danish Foreign Ministry, Daniel T'seleie from the Canadian Youth Delegation, and Daniel Nielsen from the Copenhagen Post. We'll be back tomorrow with more stories from inside COP15. We'll see you then.